welcome back to D&D Module Monday, a show in which I read a module and then come by to ramble about it for however long I see fit. The topic of this episode this week, Terrible Trouble at Tragidore. Now this one's kind of interesting, in the sense that I should preface, there is normally also, as you can see, my hands, you see, I'm wearing the same flannel. This was not recorded, this was actually recorded much later after the Tomb of Horrors video, but this flannel seems to rest in the back of my chair and never go anywhere else. So I kind of just figured I'll probably just wear it for these videos, this nice blue. And anyway, of course, my gloves. But Terrible Trouble at Tragidore is sort of interesting because it kind of speaks to how I actually make these videos. Normally, for the most part, there is basically always something that piques my interest about a module that makes me want to read it. And in the case of this one, I had my stack of modules, and I was looking at it, I said, where's the sleeve for that one? You remember Tomb of Horrors, it had the sleeve with the cover art and everything else on it, and I'm sitting here and I'm saying, where's my sleeve? And I went looking, and then again with a Google search, I was reminded that there is no sleeve for Terrible Trouble at Tragidore, and there is no sleeve for it because it actually came with the Dungeon Master screen for 2nd edition AD&D, which is very interesting. We could take a look at this for a moment. This is obviously a Dungeon Master screen, has anything that a Dungeon Master might need at a sort of moment's notice, morale, calculating Thacos, saving throws, stuff like that. Anything that at a moment's notice a Dungeon Master might want to have on hand. And this is a pretty good one, all in all, with weapon stuff, armor ratings. If you've never actually DM'd before, you might look at some of the stuff that's on here and be like, oh, well, what do you need that for? What do you need punching and wrestling results for? And the truth is, you probably won't until one of your players walks into the nearest tavern and decides to start a bar fight. Then you'll probably need the punching and wrestling results. But this is overall a pretty cool, pretty good DM screen as far as what it has on it, what it gives the DM. Obviously, I think the best part of it is this artwork. My goodness, this is some killer artwork. And actually, too, what I'd like to point out on the back here, it actually has... So this is the back. This is what your players would see, theoretically, if you were sitting at a table. And on the back here is saving throws for various items, as well as concealment and initiative modifiers, which are something your players might actually need to know. So this is just really, really smart design, and I find that cool. I'm a fan of that. I like smart design. So putting the stuff that your players might actually have use for, where they can see it, I like that. But this Terrible Trouble at Tragidore came with this Dungeon Master screen. I'll read it here. This indispensable aid to Dungeon Masters puts all the most important combat and encounter tables at your fingertips. Don't slow down the action by searching for a number. Keep them in front of you all the time with this handy screen and reference guide. Also included is a 16-page adventure, Terrible Trouble at Tragidore. This exciting RPGA, which I don't know what that means, tournament adventure is intended for medium-level characters, levels 5 through 8. It contains advice and tips for novice dungeon masters, but is suitable for use by all players. Fair enough. And Terrible Trouble at Tragidore, as you could probably see that, was made or written by Gene and Bruce. I think it's probably Rabe. It might be like Rob, and I'm terribly sorry, but I don't know, and I couldn't really find it. But anyway, the second thing, beyond the fact that for a moment I thought it didn't have a cover, or that I'd lost the cover, that piqued my interest is that after I did Google Terrible Trouble at Tragidore, the very first results that I saw were people basically debating whether or not this is the worst module of all time. And that has a funny way of sort of wanting to find out if that's true. Now, I can say, after having taken the time to read this, I personally don't think this is the worst module of all time. That's my opinion. I think it is incredibly bland. I think this is about as vanilla. This is like the factory default for adventure modules. And the funny thing is, I actually recorded this episode once before and really didn't like how it came out. And primarily, I'm actually going to try to get through this a bit faster, because there really is not a whole lot to talk about with this module, at least as far as the module itself, because it is so generic. Basically, this is, again, it's a mid-level module, levels 5 through 8, and what has caused people to really hate this module so much is really one twist at the very start of it. Now, what that twist is, so I'll back up for a moment. Basically, what you do is, Tragidore, it's a village, and you see a help wanted sign. Help wanted, desperately. The town of Tragidore is in need of a few brave souls to undertake a perilous mission. The danger is great, but the reward for success is very generous. Interested parties should travel to the Cawing Crow in Tragidore and ask for Marta. So you set out, you have your group of players who are mid-level, and you say, okay, let's get to Tragidore, and let's get to fixing this. Tragidore, I don't think this actually has, unless I've completely forgotten or just missed it. I don't believe. Oh, there it is. RPGA is a network. A network? No. I still don't know what RPGA means. I guess that was some sort of brand or whatever. Whatever it is. Anyway, I don't think Tragidore has any specific setting. Obviously, it's made for 2nd edition AD&D, but I don't think it has any particular setting, so you could theoretically put this in anything. I mean, really, you can put pretty much any module in anything, but again. So you set out, you get this notice, this missive, that something's going on at Tragidore, and they need your help. This is where this module, this is a prime example, and again, I don't think this is the worst module ever, but this is a prime example of how making one wrong move, one poor decision, can completely ruin everything that comes later. So there are a number of encounters that you come across as you actually make your way to Tragidore. Most of them are pretty harmless. You can come across a group of refugees who can give you some information, some rejects who, again, most of these are very much just like fluff. There's some ruffians you can kill. There's a drunk guy. These actually don't matter all that much. They basically just are meant to sort of give you something to do. However, the one encounter that you do come across on your way to Tragidore is so horrendous that it basically ruins the rest of the module. Basically, you get ransacked by a group of bandits, who for some reason, these bandits, are pretending to be vampires. I have no idea why. It's never brought up again. It's really dumb. But even stupider is the fact that these fake vampires, now remember, this is a mid-level party, this is a level 5 to 8 party, so these are characters that your players have spent some time with, assuming this is integrated into an existing campaign. The entire purpose of this encounter is so that these fake vampire, not vampire bandits can steal all your stuff. This is terrible. It's really awful. It is a really, really terrible way to start a module. Why you would take a mid-level module in which people may be playing characters that they've spent a lot of time with and proceed to steal everything from them makes absolutely no sense. And you might say to yourself, oh, well, you could just fight the bandits. Can you? Because you really can't. See, these bandits, these fake vampires, have with them 6 zombies, 20 bandits made of 4 patrols of 5 members each, 4 bandit sergeants who are 2nd level fighters, the normal bandits are 1st level fighters, a cleric of 5th level, and a mage of 5th level. You're not winning. You're not winning. I don't care. I mean, it says you're supposed to have 4 to 6 player characters. I understand those groups of bandits are, yes, they're 1st and 2nd level, But there are 32 enemies you're fighting. You're not winning. You are not winning. This encounter is blatantly designed to effectively force you to surrender for your lives, because they won't kill you if you don't force them to. This is basically set up to force you to surrender so that they can steal all your stuff. And it completely ruins everything that comes after it in the module. Because the funny thing is, then, now you limp to Tragidore after you've been stolen from. And you get to Tragidore, and you get to the Cawing Crow, and basically the story at Tragidore is that all the men are going missing. The women are still here, they're sort of taking care of the village, but all the men have gone missing. They go out into the woods, it's a logging village, and they don't return. You go to meet Marta at the inn, I'll read it here. The woman at the table rises and speaks. Welcome to Tragidore. You are the first group to pass the test in several days, and we hope you will be able to help. My name is Marta. For several weeks now, the men of our town have been disappearing, one by one and in small groups, when they ventured into the forest to the north. At first, we thought we were being plagued by a pack of wolves or some other wild creatures, but now we have come to realize that this is not the work of mere animals. Many of us women are strong and fit, but we dare not depart from Tragidore to investigate, because that would leave the other townsfolk vulnerable. So we have been seeking the aid of brave and trustworthy adventurers such as yourselves. Go into the woods and find out who or what has been kidnapping our menfolk, and locate the victims if they are still alive. Return to us with whatever people or information you can gain, and we will pay a handsome reward. Forgive me for a moment as I readjust my headphones as to take the hair out of my face. So, okay, whatever. So now, I mean, that's fine, except for the fact that you now don't have any of the stuff that you actually want for your players. And you take, obviously you agree, because at this point, after you've been stolen from, you're not going to say no. You're in too deep at this point, so you say yes, and you can sort of, they give you some rumors for the people you can talk with about Tragidore, but there's really nothing going on in Tragidore. If anything, actually, if you take too long, like, they get mad, like, and they basically just assume that you're not going to do it, so you kind of have to take the quest and just, like, leave into the forest. This is the map here. The map here, and you go on the logging path into the forest. So this is where, again, why I think this module is largely ruined by that really ill-conceived notion to steal everything from the players, which I imagine was for some sort of like, oh, it's a challenge, they have to do it all without their stuff. And yes, I mean, I guess that would create a challenge, but you also have to remember that people probably like the stuff that's on their characters, and stealing it from them for a short adventure, and then not giving it back, by the way, you never get it back, is just kind of dumb. But this is why I think one mistake can so taint everything that comes later, because believe it or not, this is when you get into the forest, you start dealing with encounters, everything here is pretty much fine. These random encounters, there's a centaur, owlbears, wild boars, that sort of stuff. That's all. They're fine. They're fine encounters. And these special events. Now, the biggest problem with these special events, and these special events are fine too. You fight you can basically see it here, what's effectively a Venus flytrap. This is fine. All this stuff is fine from a balance and gameplay standpoint. The biggest problem with these special events is that they're not random. And if you take a look at the map, and I'll try to get it as close as I can so that you can see. So if you see on the map there the lettering. Well, if you go straight from the logging path, right? Each hex is a 4th mile. If you go straight from the logging path from Tragidore, you're going to hit A, C, D, and E. You'll probably miss B. So these are not special events that have some sort of lower chance of happening or something special happening when they do happen. They're just going to happen. Again, unless you're taking a really weird roundabout way that no one is realistically taking. Which means the only encounter you are going to come across is some manticores. They don't really matter that much. They're just monsters. They don't really have much of anything of note. But the reason it's railroading. It's railroading. If you hadn't figured that out, the fact that these events are placed so that the chance of you missing them is very small, again, it's railroading. And it's railroading because the final special event is a Lamia. And this is where this whole sort of module kind of falls apart, because the story gets revealed as a really awful, sort of boring, basically there's a Lamia in the forest who is under the control of a drow priestess who has set up camp in the forest, because apparently an entire group of drow has set up camp in the forest and no one has noticed. No one's seen them. There was a drow with the fake vampires, but apparently no one has seen them en masse to notice that, hey, there might be some drow in the forest, and basically the woman is using this Lamia to attract men to the drow to act as slaves, because obviously, drow, they wouldn't take women. Women are not slaves in drow society. That's not how it works. So they take all the men. The Lamia uses her charms, blah, blah, blah. And the Lamia is trying to buy her freedom. And it's just really, really dumb. Because guess what? Then you kill the Lamia, and then you walk about 2 steps further forward, and you find the drow outpost. Just chilling in the woods that apparently no one else saw, or saw any mention of, or movement, or anything. So you really don't have much of a story, because then you enter, it's called Zara's Hideaway, that is the name of the woman, Zara. And you enter the hideaway, and you kill the guards, or you can sneak a little bit, but there's kind of like no point to sneak. It's kind of easier to just kill them. And the funny thing is, again, I think these encounters are fairly balanced. I don't see anything in these character sheets. I got a piece of hair that will not stay back in my headphones. I'm so sorry. These encounters are balanced. I imagine they're probably made a bit tougher by the fact that you've had all your stuff stolen from you. But I imagine if you were to just play them normally, they'd be very fair. There's nothing here that's completely ridiculous or out of the ordinary or unfair. I actually think it's very fair in a lot of respects. As far as these stat lines go. There's some goodies to find in the tower, but not really anything of note. There's some gold and platinum, whatever. It's a very typical sort of slog. It's a dungeon crawl. It's a dungeon crawl that for no reason steals all your stuff. And you go in, and now you traverse down, and you eventually come across. One thing I will say is that this is basically like the final area. It has a few different areas, but this is basically the final area. You come across and you basically mow your way through the hideout, and you kill Zara, find her in a room, you kill her apprentice, and eventually you go down into the mines and you find all the men that they've captured, and you break them out of their spell, or at least the ones you can break out of their spell. You kill the orcs and whatnot, and some of the other drow figures that are sort of watching over them. You bring them back to town. Everything's fine and dandy. That's the whole module. Yeah. There's really not any story worthwhile. I think the sad thing is, I think these encounters are fine. I actually think they're kind of cool. I think Zara has the makings of a pretty tough fight. She has some really nice spells in her spell book. She's a high-level mage. Same goes for her. She's an 11th level mage. Same goes for her apprentice. I think it's just a shame that I think from a combat standpoint, this stuff is pretty well set up. But the idea of that, the way this all starts is just such an unfun way to start a module. I think it's almost a non-starter. I don't think you could ever play this module. And I think that's why, again, do I think this is the worst module ever? No, because it outside of the way it starts, it doesn't do anything offensively bad. It's very boring. It's very, very boring. I mean, it's 16 pages. It probably took me about an hour to read. It felt like it took me about 8. It's very, very boring. There's really nothing interesting about this. I think having your stuff stolen was meant to be interesting. Like, oh, what a challenge. But I don't think any player would reasonably see that as a fair challenge, being put up against a fight you can't win with no way then to get your stuff back. I don't think anyone. So again, I think these encounters are fine. I think the writing of this module is fine from a technical standpoint. It's actually very well written, but all of this is just kind of wasted because no one's going to want to play it after the start. It doesn't help that this is a really sort of schlocky story, that there's really nothing interesting here, because after you kill Zara and you get down into the mines and the tunnels, you save all the people and you take them back to town and they reward you. And there isn't even like a set reward. It just kind of tells you to like give the players whatever you think they should get based on how they did. How many people they saved, whether they defeated the drow or let them escape. Like, it's completely disappointing. It feels very much like a module that you would expect to get for free with something else you bought. The sad thing about all this is if you were getting into D&D, say you went out and you bought the Dungeon Master screen because you were trying to get into D&D. You wanted to maybe run it for your friends. The one thing that this module does that I actually really sincerely enjoy is that it very much is written with the novice GM in mind. It has many sections. You have this section, getting started. And if I keep flipping through, when you get to Tragidore, it tells you a little bit about how to sort of deal with Tragidore and the rumors and whatever in these blocked texts. It shows you what this is a really great one. This ins and outs of encounters tells a young DM how to run encounters. I think that's great. I love any module that keeps in mind the more novice player because, while I might not need it, someone might. I can very easily skip over this entire block of text. I didn't for the purpose of this episode, but if I were running this, I could. And that's fine, but someone might find this super useful. And these sections that sort of describe how things should be done are fairly useful. And I think would be useful to anyone sort of trying to get their feet wet. But again, I also think this module, beyond not really being interesting, being very bland, I think that's a horrible example for how a module should be run. If you were, again, implementing this into an existing campaign, why would you do that to your players? To steal all their stuff? It makes absolutely no sense. How much time wasted? Just to make some fights in a drow hideout a little harder? Why not just make the encounters a bit tougher to compensate? Like, let people keep their stuff, and maybe instead of these drow fighters, these dark elf guards, maybe instead of being 3rd level fighters, they're 5th level fighters. What would be so wrong with that? And it's like I said, I don't think, outside of that really dumb twist at the beginning, I don't think this module does anything offensively bad. It's just not very interesting. And not very interesting with a horrible starting premise makes for what I guess a lot of people see as the worst module of all time. I think that's a bit much, in my opinion, because I think there are modules that are sincerely poorly designed, and I guess you could say that's true about Tragidore, that start is really poorly designed, but again, I don't think the other 90% of this module is. I don't think something being boring means it's poorly designed. So, yeah, I mean, I came away almost with indifference. I wasn't, like, really mad at this module. I guess I would be, maybe if I was a player. I could understand that. What I did note is that I would actually love to see this module, especially because of the way that it keeps in mind the novice player. I would have loved to have seen this module as the opening for a campaign. So instead of, like, you start in a tavern, I would have loved to see, instead, you start getting ransacked by bandits. Don't make them, I still don't know why they're fake vampires. Like, they literally have, like, painted white sticks for fangs. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense in the scope of the module. But have that be the start of this module. The group is getting ransacked by a group of bandits. party's getting ransacked by a group of bandits. They got to run away. They're first and second level whelps, and they got to run to Tragidore, limping in, only to find no help. Tragidore's had its own hardships and needs help of its own. But you know what? Now you can do some good. You've got a chance. You're down on your luck. You can do some good. That would be a pretty fun way to start a campaign. To start a campaign when you don't have anything to lose. And now you get to go through a sort of campaign that brings in the drow. Drow are popular. You know, most people, fantasy fans, know what dark elves and drow are. So now you get to bring in the drow, and you get to fight some drow and kill some drow. And that would be great, and it would be a great start to a campaign. This is awful implemented into one that's existing. Because then, you know, you'd get to fight and kill some drow, you get to save some people, you'd get some loot to better your succeeding adventures, and now you're Fireforged friends. Like, I think if this had just been rewritten, literally take the bandit ransacking and make it the start of the module and the start of a campaign, and I think this module is completely fine. Obviously, you would need to change everything to rescale it down to what would likely be a first or third level campaign, but you get what I'm saying. So, yeah, my opinion of Terrible Trouble at Tragidore, this is not, I don't think this is the worst module of all time. It just makes one really, really bad decision and is really, really, really boring otherwise. The DM screen that it comes with is very cool. I'm a fan of this. I like this guy. I love this artwork. I'm going to say it again. But yeah, maybe a bit hyperbolic as far as what people's opinions are. But I think it's a shame because I think there is some good here. Like I said, the way that it keeps in mind the novice player. The artwork is nice too. These maps are very readable. I didn't notice anything on a technical level, again, as far as the writing goes. That was all great. A lot of blocked text. I like modules with a lot of blocked text that sort of give you a lot to describe to your players. I enjoy that. This is, from a strictly technical standpoint, a pretty well done module. But as far as the actual content, I think the encounters are fine. I think they're well balanced. But I think they're wasted on a premise that I don't think anyone would enjoy. So, again, if you wanted to run Tragidore, maybe do it the way I said. Make this the start of your campaign. And I think that would be kind of neat. Kind of cool. But this is not... It has its reputation for a reason. Hyperbolic? I don't know. Hyperbole, as it might be. Again, I think it's a bit much, but everything earns its reputation for a reason. And Terrible Trouble at the Tragidore is, in some ways, for a lot of people, pretty terrible.